This is the Elite Sport Mentality Podcast with me, Tom Evans. Welcome to the Elite Sport Mentality Podcast, where we'll be exploring all things sports psychology. Whether you're an athlete, coach, or sports enthusiast, this podcast is your go-to resource for understanding the mental side to sports performance. Each episode, I'll be talking to someone from the world of sport or sports psychology to get their insights into the mental side of their sport. We'll delve into the latest research, share inspiring stories from top athletes, and provide practical tips to you to enhance your mental skills. Join me as I look to unlock the secrets to an elite sport mentality. Let's go. Okay. Welcome to the Elite Sport Mentality Podcast with me, Tom Evans. I'm here today joined by Luke Doherty, who is the founder of Mindful Peak Performance. And today we're going to go into Luke's backstory around his sporting history, but also how he came about finding Mindful Peak Performance and then the underlying sort of principles, I suppose, around mindfulness. So first off, thank you for joining us, Luke.
No worries. Thank you for the invitation.
No worries. So this came about because you did some staff CPD for us at the college a couple of months back, and all around how you found Mindful Peak Performance and your story. So it's a story that I've heard, but I thought it was such a kind of a powerful one, and your kind of journey through it. I thought it would be a great resource for the athletes that engage with this podcast as well. So starting with that, can you talk me through, first of all, like your sporting background and your exposure of sports psychology from that?
Yeah, cool. So my background is in rugby, and when I was about 11, went on a bit of a quest, wanted to be a professional rugby player with a group of friends, and that was my main goal for till I was about 20 years old, and was lucky to get a scholarship when I was 16 to go to a school that took rugby very seriously. And when I was 18, got capped for England under 18s, and that was a big part of my journey was driving towards that goal. I didn't go any further than that because I don't think I was big enough actually to go fully pro. Rugby, I was playing flanker, number 7. It's a very fit position, and I was very small for that size. So in many ways, I then left sport, and I found it really hard to engage with sport socially after that, because I was playing at such an intense, driving towards such an intense goal. So I kind of stopped sport for quite a while there, and after that, Pinnacle, and then did a couple of degrees in law and used the same discipline from rugby and the transferable skills from that, and applied myself to something that I didn't really like, which was law, but I managed to do pretty well with that. And then went through a bit of a period of not really knowing what I wanted to do, and a bit of burnout from that. And in that period, that's when I found mindfulness, and it kind of changed my life. I'd learned to train my body really intensely for 7 years, and I'd learned discipline, drive, the importance of teamwork, but I hadn't learned anything about how to sustain high performance and look after my mental health and train my mind. And once I'd found meditation and mindfulness principles, it just changed my life, literally. And I then spent about 7 years training in mindfulness, and both in a Buddhist context, but also did some training at Oxford, an organisation called Breathworks, and that's where I honed my skills to become a mindfulness teacher. And I started working with people with depression, addiction, stress, in group contexts, and then I realised then actually I'm not a monk. I don't think I'm going to go down that route, but I'd learned some really deep principles and practices, and I then went back into the sports world. So I started working initially with Saracens Rugby Club, and started teaching them mindfulness and meditation, and then Harlequins, I was with them for about a year, and then different sports started opening up from there, worked with some GB sports, professional cricket, just started to really see the power of mindfulness in sport as a performance tool, but also something that can really help you look after your mental health in all areas of your life, and the link between the two. Just my journey's just sort of evolved through the different phases of my life, and it just feels like an honor to be able to dip back into the sports world and give something that I didn't really have when I was 16 to 18 on that incredible drive to be a pro athlete, which many of the listeners will have that same drive. I didn't have those techniques then. So it feels like to be able to link back into the sports world and give back something that I didn't have then.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to know, is that you're the age that predominantly listeners 16 to 18 in whatever sport they're in. So you were the same when you were kind of at the highest level that you played at. You were their age as well. And was mental skills or psychology, sports psychology, kind of even a thing that you'd heard of or thought about back then? I know you mentioned developing leadership and those sort of qualities that everyone's always sort of thought are important, but did you have much sort of understanding of mental skills back then?
There was no real narratives or no real exposure to sports psychology. Lucky that I had amazing coaches and amazing friends, and like that was resource, but there was I didn't tap into anything on that level. So no, it wasn't a predominant thing in the culture. No. It was just no resource towards it.
No, the best sports psychology is delivered through those sort of people. I feel like physios, coaches, and stuff like that. So if they're delivering those good messages and developing those skills, and that's amazing. And then I remember you talking about how you first came about mindfulness and meditation, and that was it a trip with a friend to do yoga or meditation or something?
Well remembered. So I was in quite a high pressure job at the time, and I was managing a team, and I was really stressed, and a lot of anxiety, and I was out of my depth. I was like 23, and I'd taken on a responsibility that was too much for me. Again, the drive, from the athlete came in and just wanted to achieve something, and I was out of my depth, and that's when I found meditation, and I snuck in behind. I bought a friend a kind of birthday present to go and meditate at a local Buddhist center, and I snuck in. And I needed the help, not her. And I'm so glad I did step through the door, because it just switched something on for me about something that was lacking in my life, about how I look after my own mental health, and how I learned to kind of understand my mind and how I react and respond to things. So it was pretty much an overnight switch on. And I was like, whoa, this is powerful. And to the extent that the people I was managing, like a couple of weeks later, they didn't really recognize me, not physically, but I wasn't reacting. I wasn't I had much more space around me to kind of see things clearly and respond to things without reacting. And that's where I saw the power of how this could be applied in sport, because in sport, you've got big pressure moments, and then you've got all the pressure that you've got outside of sport to deal with as well. And how we kind of learn to relate to that and release that pressure, that is key to how we show up and how clearly we can channel our energy towards what we want to achieve. So yeah, that was quite a big moment for me.
Yeah, it's that kind of penny dropping moment, and I guess these things can sometimes happen like that, can't they? Where it's like, God, why have I not been doing this the whole time? But then I don't want people to listen to this thinking it has to be like that. Sometimes it does take a few sessions and a few practices to kind of develop the skill and be more effective at doing it, I suppose.
A really good point, because actually I say that, but it's for some people it's just a steady mindfulness practice that they develop, and over time it gradually you start to see the benefit. For some people it's a very quick thing. Yeah. The only thing I would say for athletes, and I would to encourage people, I think athletes are in a privileged position with mindfulness, and they may not realize it, because a lot of athletes are very physically engaged with their body, and they're training a lot, and they're not as absorbed in 8 hours of screen time a day. So it's like the nervous system and the body's more ready to connect to meditation practice with that physical training that's there with athletes. So there's a bit of a sweet spot there. I'm finding the more work I do in the sports world, a lot of athletes, their nervous system responds quicker than most people to meditation, because they're more connected to their body.
Yeah, that's really good. I remember you saying that the training, I think when you did deliver that training, a lot of the staff are elite athletes as well, so I think that resonated with them, thinking like you say, if they've got a little injury, if they're kind of not feeling right, if they're a bit tight in a certain area, they know about it. It's their livelihood, isn't it? So they're so switched on with that sort of stuff. So it does make sense what you say there. So obviously that's a really interesting journey, how you went from where you were to kind of where you are now. And can you talk me through mindful peak performance? Like, how did that come about, and what's the overall sort of aim, I suppose, of mindful peak performance as an organization?
Yeah, cool. So that 7-year period of training, when I was in a Buddhist context, that came to an end, and I realized that I wanted to take my understanding out into the world. I didn't want to keep understanding in that context, and then because I've got a sporting background, it just made sense. Pretty quickly, I decided to set the company up to initially go into the sports world and then start learning a new way to teach mindfulness in really high pressure environments where people don't have a lot of time, and how does mindfulness go into those environments. And along the way, we developed this thing called boxing and mindfulness. So I was really inspired by how quickly some of the athletes were adopting mindfulness because they were doing a lot of physical training. So I took that idea and I started bringing mindfulness practices and principles into boxing gyms and working with young people. And we developed this method that integrates physical training and boxing particularly with meditation practices. And that was bringing the kind of mind and the body and mental and physical training together. And it was just a real sweet spot. So we've now got a training that's been a 5-year journey. And we were really lucky to get about £200,000 worth of funding from the government and various grant bodies to develop that approach. And that's now a training program for youth workers. So we train youth workers to pass on boxing and mindfulness training in youth contexts so that young people can find a new way into meditation and mindfulness. So that's the community side of what we do that's been very influenced by the sports world. And then the third pillar is the organisation. So we work with leadership teams and using mindfulness on a one-to-one coaching level to help them perform at high levels themselves and learn how to deal with the pressures of leadership and the isolation and all of the things that come along with being a leader. How can mindfulness and meditation help you enhance that so your relationship with yourself is stronger, so your relationship and influence is better? And we also do conflict resolution and day events for leaders. And then that's it. Yeah, that's the 3 pillars of the organisation, and they kind of all interact. The more we work with leaders and organisations, the stronger our company becomes financially, the more we can give back to the community. The more we work with the sports world, the more it influences the young people we work with in the community, and it's like a bit of an ecosystem.
That community work's really interesting to me, because you think of, I'm definitely no expert in meditation or mindfulness. I work with a lot of athletes, and sometimes it might be something I suggest to them about kind of looking into it and looking at just breathing technique or breathing practices. And I'm always not reluctant, but I always think sometimes they might think of it as a bit sort of airy-fairy and a bit sort of, I don't know what necessarily the word is, but just you going into those boxing gyms where you got kind of in the community where you can imagine there's quite a lot of bravado and quite a lot of kind of quite a macho maybe environment. How have you found that buy-in from maybe one of the harder to sort of engage populations maybe that you kind of could work with? How have you found their engagement with it?
I'm smiling because I don't know why, but one of my sweet spots seems to be like working in the most resistant areas to mindfulness and like somehow making it work. But I remember the first ever boxing and mindfulness session we did. I think I told this story on the when I was at Loughborough, but no one turned up to the session, and we were in this community centre in Leighton near the boxing gym, and there was a group of young people smoking weed in the side of to the side of the centre, and they pretty much wanted to kick off with us, to be honest. But we had a conversation with them, and they agreed to give it a go. Now they were high, and I'm just saying that was a fact of what of the situation. But they gave it a go, and we taught them meditation. They did the boxing, did the meditation. They really got it. Now I don't know if it's because they were high as well, like I said on the day, but that gave me the confidence to continue, because I thought, God, if we can engage people in this way, this boxing, having this boxing symbol really helped. So then we went there down to the boxing gym, and we got 25 young people turn up to an 8-week course that we developed that combined the two together. 20 of them completed it, and all their parents came down at the end of the session. There was such a hype around the fact that they were into meditation and mindfulness. And because we were in boxing gyms, and because we had the buy-in of some of the founders of the boxing gyms, and they were doing the boxing training, we could bring in the mindfulness in relationship to a place where they felt safe. So we weren't like asking them to come down to a centre and meditate. We were meeting them in their environment. And I think and developing a language around the mindfulness that connect to the sports world, and kind of creating it with them and being like, well, how can we create this together, as opposed to getting them to kind of do traditional mindfulness programs where they got to sit still for a long period of time. So we were just really open, and because we were listening to the young people and we were willing to go into the environments that they were happy in, that just made it a really dynamic thing. And I think that's why it kind of exploded, and why we had so much traction.
Yeah, amazing. I'm always kind of encouraging athletes to make it their own. Like, you don't have to do the full blown sort of 10-15 minutes breathing practices, like even if it's just an initial kind of few breaths before you compete, or just kind of having that moment to think about kind of what you're doing and taking control of breathing and slowing everything down. It's just that kind of engaging with it at some level. So this is maybe a question I should have opened with, really, because we're kind of taking for granted, I suppose, that everyone listening knows what mindfulness is and knows what meditation is. So how would you define it? What would you class mindfulness as? What are the principles of it, would you say?
Yeah, well, I'm reticent to give a classical definition of what mindfulness is, but I would say to anyone listening, you probably already know what it is. There's probably been a moment in your life, or many moments in your sporting career already, where you've been in a flow state, where you're not thinking about the past or the future, and you're fully engaged in what you're doing. Now, in a way, that's a really absorbed, mindful state of mind. So mindfulness is about how can we move towards that? How can we work with the mental distractions that take us to the past and the future, and learn to be in that flow state, which most people have a feeling for, even if it's not for meditation practice. So I think mindfulness is something that everybody already innately has, but a meditation practice that can help you kind of bring that about more and more, and work with the distractions that get in the way of being in a flow state.
Yeah, perfect. And then what would you say the benefits are for just in general, and then maybe would you say then there's performance benefits? So if it's a kind of someone who's not necessarily an athlete, what would they benefit from engaging in it, and from performance in an athletics perspective? What benefits would you see there?
Yeah, well, I think it's if somebody adopts mindfulness and they can make it real for them, they don't have to do 10 minutes a day, but if they can have they can have the confidence to stop and pause when they're under pressure, and learn to calm that and come and ground themselves and become centered. That's gonna, that just helps you show up more with your energy clearly ready to go where you want to put it, as opposed to being anxious and your energy scattered. Like, it helps you gather up your energy and really apply it. So at key moments, like before you're going out to whatever your sport is, you can apply these practices and ideas in the direct moments where your anxiety or where your energy might start spilling out. So in that way, you show up to your performance more clear, more potent, more kind of regulated and ready to engage with whatever you're doing. I also think it's really powerful for if you're injured and you've got like a physical injury, and you're kind of worried about that, you've got a tool to work with the distracting thoughts that can really kind of be very draining, and learn to kind of actually not get caught in those kind of loops. I think it's also very good for judgments, and if any athletes go for any sense of feeling like they've failed, like how do you reset from that? So it can apply to all of these areas of athletic performance where there's pressure, or where you come out of alignment with flow. You can start like building practices and building confidence that you can change those patterns. I also think it's really important that athletes see this as not just in relationship to athletic performance, because if you can start to see, well, there's pressure everywhere, not everywhere, but pressure doesn't just exist in relation to athletic performance. There could be stuff going on at home. And if you can learn to apply the principles and practices there, your athletic performance is naturally going to increase, because you're going to be carrying less pressure at home, and you're going to. So it can apply once people get it. You can start using the practices and principles wherever there's pressure, and that's just going to make you feel happier.
Yeah, amazing. And I know I can imagine the answer might be quite based on individuals, and there's no kind of blanket sort of answer for this, but what might that look like for an athlete thinking about engaging in maybe some breathing technique or meditation to try and encourage that mindfulness? And what would that look like? When would you kind of encourage them to do it? Is it, like you say, just before they step out on the track or the pitch or whatever their domain is, or could they be doing it throughout the week? Like what exactly could that look like for someone who just wants to dip their toe and have a try of it?
I think there's two levels. Well, first of all, anyone listening to this, if you can give them our meditation library, I can send you a link. So if anyone wants to start any practices, there's two levels. There's like if you want to develop, I think the best way is to try and develop a daily practice, even 5 to 10 minutes a day. In fact, the science is showing that. I thought it was over 6 months, but the latest science is showing that if you do 12 minutes a day over 8 weeks, the neurological pathways in your brain change. So it's quite a powerful practice. So I would say, if anyone's listening to this and are curious, try for a couple of weeks, having a daily or every other day mindfulness practice, just doing 5 or 10 minutes a day, and seeing if it has an impact, seeing seeing if you're thinking more clearly or you're feeling more calm, and just start to assess it from your own experience. And then I would suggest starting to build it in to your training program, depending on where pressure builds up. So if it's the night before a performance, on the morning of a performance, could you do a 3-minute practice, a 2-minute practice directly after, when there's a lot, can it aid recovery in that way, and start again putting the practices in certain places where there's pressure and seeing if it makes you feel more connected, more focused and calmer. And then you start to then believe in it or not. And then that gives you the motivation to then get a bit more structured with how you apply the practices.
Yeah. And I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but again, I think I mentioned at the start, if I'm kind of trying to get an athlete to engage in any sort of mental skill or mental technique, sports side technique, like visualization or breathing technique or whatever it might be, I'm always kind of encourage them, don't just go one and done, like make sure you kind of do keep at it, because it's like if I was going to go down and try and run 100-meter hurdles, like I'm going to fall over most of the hurdles because I've never done it before. So it's the same principle, I think, with these sort of mental skills that we're trying to develop, is that they are the same as physical skills, technical skills, and they will get better, you will get more effective at doing them. So just because you might try it once and you feel no benefit and you don't get that kind of penny dropping moment, it doesn't mean that it's not going to work and it hasn't worked. It just means that you got to maybe practice it a bit more and stick with it to see that effectiveness sort of kick in.
And maybe one way to think about it is, everyone on this podcast will know something about training their body, but in these practices, every time your mind wanders off and you start getting distracted, you're learning to come back to the sensations in the body, to the present moment, which is the place we access flow from. And every time you do that, that's a repetition, like you're building mental muscle mass and building strength to be present and not get distracted in thought processes. And that is like a muscle that you can train to quite a strong degree. Yeah. And
then with this meditation library, I think, if you don't mind, I'll put it in maybe in the bio of the episode so people can have a look. What's in that? Like, what does that consist of? Just like lots and lots of different practices, or
not a huge
what does
amount.
That look like?
There's a couple of key practices. They're just 5 and 10 minute options, daily practices to keep people connected to their direct experience of and moving distracted thoughts. And then there's micro practices, which we created with Harlequin's rugby team, which was a series of practices that are 3 minutes long for in between training sessions, to help recovery, to help prepare for performance on the day. So it's split into sections, so people can play around with like little 3-minute practices around key areas, and they can have a 5 or 10 minute daily practice.
Okay. And what have you, because normally when I think of, like, I suppose meditation, I just think of it more of an individual thing, and I guess that's what would be sort of encouraging any athlete listening to this maybe to start thinking about doing. But from the sounds of it, you've also done group mindfulness and stuff like that. What's the difference between sort of a solo mindfulness or meditation and group meditation? Have you seen any differences in the outcomes you get? Like, is there any performance differences or any kind of benefits from doing one over the other, do you think?
Well, yeah, they're kind of two things that relate. I think when I worked at Harlequins for the first 3 months, I was mainly doing one-to-one work with the players to get buy-in and get people to connect with it. And the one-to-one work, you've really got to learn to like make it work for you in your life, and that's really important. Then if you get a group of people together practicing, it's supportive. Like it's developed a culture that it's okay to stop and be still and kind of bring the pressure down and kind of connect. And sometimes after meditation practices, communicating a bit more and bringing the team together, it has a team building effect. But it was really powerful working with Harlequins on a group level, because once they had buy-in, it's quite a radical thing in a sporting environment to have periods of time where there's stillness and calm, and a group together are not they're learning to be still, and how that can like support with decreasing stress, bring people into a different kind of connection, build stronger bonds. So it's I think they both work really well together. That one doesn't work without the other in a way. It's kind of they need to fit each other.
Yeah, and I guess I know when we did it, you kind of went through a practice or two when we did the CPD, and that kind of like nervousness and I don't want to look silly very quickly kind of goes out the window when you realise everyone's doing it. So there's no reason to feel that way, and no reason to feel embarrassed or anything.
No, it is an odd thing. It can be an odd thing if you're not used to sitting in silence with a group of your teammates, but I think it's also really helpful because when people start sharing, you start debriefing, and everyone sees that everyone's mind is very busy. It's not just you that's got a difficulty working with difficult thoughts or distractions. We're all in it together. You start to normalize and realize, that you can sort of help each other understand that we're all human. We've got these incredibly busy minds. And if you've just got solo practice and you think it's just me and my busy mind, that, you start to realize we're all in the same boat. And the Harvard research, which I quoted on the day, was like 50% of the time we're thinking about something other than what we're doing. When you then close your eyes and you start working with that, it's like some people freak out. It's like, oh God, I'm just I can't meditate. But that's what it's like. We've got to learn to like work with that, and we're all in the same boat really on that level. So when we work grouping, we start to see we're kind of the same. That's a relief. It's like we're all kind of in it together.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you spoke earlier, and kind of the last couple of questions, but you spoke earlier about making it a sort of daily habit. And I suppose easier said than done in a way, because as a sports psychologist working with athletes, making things habitual is like the goal, isn't it? These good habits, good behaviours that we want to see in athletes demonstrate, or hopefully they want to demonstrate, is the end goal. But what would your sort of advice be to anyone listening to this to make it a daily habit, to make it something that you do quite naturally, that's just part of your day? Like I say, it's sometimes easier said than done to say, okay, just do it for 12 minutes every day. Is there any sort of tips and techniques around that?
Well, I think actually it's about not just doing it because it's a good idea. After you do the practices, you've got to really get a fit. You've got to be really honest. Am I feeling calmer? Am I noticing the benefit of this and reinforcing from that level, as opposed to right, I've just got to do my mindfulness and making it very pressurized. It usually starts improving it definitely improved my relationship with the people around me, and often my teammates or the people I'm closest with that I would react to. So I quickly, this is helpful. This is making me show up better. So look for the benefits. And actually, if you want to make real headway with mindfulness, just 12 minutes a day over 8 weeks has been shown to change the neurological pathways in your brain. So, use the discipline of being an athlete to try an 8-week period of 12 minutes a day. I'm sure everyone, if they really were honest with themselves, has 12 minutes a day.
Yeah.
That's
a good point.
Yeah, and athletes and I adopted mindfulness very strictly through my rugby athlete conditioning. So the thing about being an athlete is there's a drive there that can set habits up. So tap into that, and then set the habit up, and then look for the benefits in how you're showing up.
Yeah, it's kind of a mindset thing, is how you look at it. It's a really good point there. And then finally, so kind of always end on this, and we may have already touched on it with the kind of the meditation library and stuff, but what would a takeaway be, or an activity would you recommend to any athlete listening to this that can help them start engaging with mindfulness?
I would say keep it really simple and just try and adopt a 5 to 10 minute practice a day from the meditation library and give it a go for 8 weeks. And keep a journal of what impact it's having. Yeah.
That reflection bit, what you said about it just before, that reflection is really important, isn't it? To actually not just do it just because you've been told to do it, or because you, like I said, the benefits that you want to get from it, but actually have a look at what is it doing. And that reflection in anything we do is so important. Yeah. So,
and then if you don't feel the benefit, or you're not noticing the benefit after that period of time, then don't continue. But if you're giving it a good go, and I think that reinforcing the experience of mindfulness having a benefit, as opposed to just doing it for the sake of it, I think that's just really important.
Yeah, it's a good message to finish on. So thanks so much for joining us today, Luke. I'm really looking forward to the CPD that we're going to continue to do, and hopefully we can continue to develop some resources to kind of put out there. But that meditation library will be a great sort of point of contact or point of resources for anyone listening to that, and I'll put that in the bio for sure. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Tom.
Cheers, Luke. So you've been listening to the Elite Sport Mentality podcast with me, Tom Evans.